Testing, testing.
Welcome to Convocations, everyone. Just a couple announcements for those who are signed up for the class, and welcome. Well, welcome to Convocations for all who are, here for the first time, all of those who are enrolled in the class. Today, our speaker is Marsha Judkins. In 2012, Marsha ran for the Provost School Board and was elected to a first-year term, entering her career in politics. But feeling as the state legislature needed a wider variety of perspectives, she ran and was elected to the Utah State House of Representatives in 2018. And she represented District 61, which includes West Provo and Southwest Orem, where she has lived in a working class neighborhood for the past 35 years. Marsha chose not to run for re-election in 2024, and while in legislature, she was a strong voice for families and for those who were most vulnerable. She served on the Social Services, Appropriations, Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice, Revenue and Taxation, and Human Health and Human Services committees. She is currently an adjunct professor in the Mathematical and Quantitative Reasoning department at Utah Valley University. She was just teaching a class down there and let them out a few minutes early to get up here right in time. And so she's always been an active volunteer, giving her time to the PTA, coaching, community building, nonprofits, and has also worked part-time as a children's librarian and substitute teacher. Marsha's favorite thing is to spend time with her 7 kids, her kids-in-law, her 13 grandchildren. She loves to read, eat good food, cuddle babies, soak up the sunshine, travel, dance, have good discussions, and be with people. Her talk today is titled Utah Politics: An Insider's Perspective. Let's give a round of applause for our speaker today.
Thank you. I am really happy that you chose to be here. I know some of you didn't choose. You had to be here because you're taking a class. I know I just came from a class of captive students who have to listen to me talk about math, so I understand. For those of you that are here by choice, holy cow, kudos to you. I love teaching, and I really, really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you today. I like to kind of have an interactive discussion. I do have, a presentation and things that I want to say, but if at any point you have questions or something that, are confused about anything I say, please, I love to have it be interactive, and maybe you can think of some things towards the end, because there will be some time also at the end that is geared toward questions. So anyway, there you go. So thank you for that introduction, Professor. That was very kind. I sometimes am technology, it did it. Okay, so this is my family. I don't know if you can see them. This is when we were down in St. George last year. I have my daughter, one of my daughters who's here, and a granddaughter who is here also. And I spent the last 6.5 years up the Capitol, but as you heard, it didn't start there. I went to school, to college. I did graduate in political science. I've always been interested in politics, but I stayed at home and raised my 7 kids, doing a lot of volunteer work. And in the back of my head maybe was always an idea that maybe I might want to get into politics, but not really. And I just kind of lived my life, kind of like you are. But as I did that, as my kids got into school, and I have some children with neurodiversity, and they had particular needs, and I was trying to work with the school board and the district and the principal, trying to figure some stuff out to help them. And then I also was trying to get an elementary school built in my neighborhood, and working with the school board on that. And I felt like I wasn't being listened to. I live on the west side of Provo, the way, way west side, and there's not very much representation down there where I live. You might feel like that here. I mean, out in a small town, you might not feel like that you have a whole lot of representation. Or as a college student, you might feel like you don't have a whole lot of representation on what goes on in the town around you, or even in the school. So as that was happening, I decided, hey, maybe I want to be on the school board and increase or better the relationship between parents, teachers, students, and the school board and the district. And so as I thought about that, I thought I want to go back to school and get a master's in public administration. Not necessary, but it did really help me to kind of focus on the things that I wanted to accomplish and how to accomplish those things. So then I ran for school board, and as I was on the board, it was a great experience. I feel like we were able to accomplish some of my goals that we were looking to accomplish. But then the state legislature, I realized, plays an even bigger role in what goes on in schools. They pass dozens of bills every session that put unfunded mandates on schools, that require certain things of schools. And some of them are good, some of these laws are good, and others are really, really frustrating. And so as a school board member, and as our whole board was trying to work with our elected representatives, our senators and the people that, were supposed to be representing us up at the state capitol, that relationship was not good. We felt like they were not listening. They actually, one of them called us liars, and I don't know, it just was not a very good relationship. And I thought, that's where the real power is, right? And so that's what made me decide to run for the Utah legislature. And as I served up there, it can be really frustrating and difficult. And what I wanted to try to do was, I felt like government had kind of failed me in certain areas, right? Failed my family, failed my neighborhood and the people that I loved in my community. And I wanted to try and see if I could change that and work, be a liaison and be an advocate for these people up at the state level. And you can do only so much. I was one of 75 representatives, and then there's also 29 senators, and then you've got the governor, and so I'm just one cog in the wheel. But I'll tell you what, being in state government does give you power. It gives you a lot of power. If I called an agency and said, hey, I want to have a meeting, something's going on in I have a constituent who contacted me, and they're having trouble with whatever, with their taxes, or with DCFS, or with whatever it is, they would meet with me, right? If I called the county, they would meet with me. So it does bring a lot of power, but when you're talking about the whole scheme of the government, it's not quite as much as you might imagine. So let's go to this next slide. Here is the Capitol. I don't know how many of you have been up to see it in Salt Lake. I mean, I think I'd lived here many, many, many years before I ever actually, when I was a state legislator, might have been the first time I ever walked inside the state capitol. So, because I didn't grow up here, so I didn't have field trips to the Capitol or anything like that. It's called the People's House because we're supposed to be representing the people. The legislature and the Senate, the governor, all of it is supposed to be representing the people. And I don't know if you knew this, but you can go inside the Capitol 24 hours a day. anytime. The doors are open, it's supposed to be your house. You can't go into every room, but you can go into the Capitol. So, I want to talk a little bit about what some of the things that we cover, because I don't know, if you guys have any questions, like I said, bring it up. But here's a slide. I don't know if you can really see it, but here are just some of the things that we pass bills on. This is a slide I showed to elementary students and high school students, and just to kind of pique their interest. So I thought, well, maybe this will pique some of your interest. I don't know if there's anything on here that interests you, that maybe you feel like, government hasn't worked for me in that area, or why are they interfering in this? Is there anything on here that you have any questions about, or wonder why it's on my list? Not really. You're like, yeah, it's just up there. Okay, so one of the big things that we do as a legislature, one of our duties, we have 2 constitutional duties in the legislature. One of them is over the budget. We're the ones that have to pass the budget, okay? And then the other one has to do with education. We are to fund public education. Everything else is just kind of a bunch of stuff that we pass laws about. And a lot of the ways that we, I don't know, sometimes you might think there's too many laws. Every year, our session, I'll start at the beginning. Okay, so the Utah legislature is a part-time legislature. We only meet for about 7 weeks out of the year, from the middle of January through the first week of March, generally speaking. And during that time, does anybody want to make a guess on how many laws they think that we pass in that time, and that it's 7 weeks? Yes, 10 laws. That's a really good guess, because when you look at the federal government, and they meet year-round, they haven't passed more than, I think last year they passed like 12 or 15 bills all the way through. Anybody have any other guesses? Yes? 2. Okay, good guesses. I love it, because I'm going to shock you now. We pass almost 600 bills in that 7-week time period. Yeah, that's all. So when I say this, we are passing multiple bills on any one of these things. This is a water rights fight, so that's what that is. This is really a fun thing. Outside of my office last year, these are people who are concerned about the Great Salt Lake. And so they are there to advocate for the Great Salt Lake. And they walked around every day. They did a silent vigil around the Capitol every single day while we were in session last year to try to encourage us to make good laws concerning the Great Salt Lake, doing some conservation there. Other things, transportation. We pass bills on transportation. This is clean air. We do worry about clean air. We don't seem like it sometimes, but we do clean air. This is vapes. There's always bills in front of us about like what age should we allow kids to vape at. It's now up to 21, right? Like you cannot vape. You cannot buy a vape. You're not supposed to be vaping unless you're 21. And we passed a bill last year that got rid of all flavors. You couldn't, except for menthol and something else. Can't remember. But 2 flavors, mint and menthol. Because that's like the gateway to further things. Anyway, and they are always trying to change that one way or the other. Medicaid, we pass a lot of things on Medicaid. We fund parts of Medicaid. The federal government funds other parts. Do you remember the big thing about the state flag? That took up so much of our time. So many people upset about that decision. Some people will be like, that's really stupid. Like, why are you worried about that? I happen to think that same thing, but there are people who are worried about it, so we got to talk about it, and we've got to pass a bill about it. I already talked about education, cannabis. Now that we have medical marijuana, we're always tweaking that law and, you know, changing that kind of a thing. So criminal justice and law enforcement, tons of bills on criminal justice and law enforcement, sex offender registry, expungement, decreasing, increasing penalties, like all kinds of stuff, renter-landlord law. Like, there is so much of it, and higher education. We stick our fingers in all of it. So it's stuff that really, really concerns you, right? But we don't even know it. Half the time we don't even know it. Here I'm going to tell you a little bit about how a bill becomes a law. Did you guys ever hear Schoolhouse Rock? Do you remember that? I'm just a bill. Yeah. Yeah, it's great, huh? I love it. I could sing it for you, but I'm not a very good singer. But I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill. Okay, that's federal. Federally, Utah looks a lot like the federal government. If you've heard of Congress and the House of Representatives that we have in Utah, we have representatives that go, and it's called a bicameral legislature, where we have two houses, House of Representatives and a House of Senators, okay? And federal government is the same. So what happens is a legislator gets an idea. You guys probably can't see this, so I'll just explain it really quick. A legislator gets an idea. Do you guys have an idea that you think should be a law? Have you ever heard someone say, oh, I wish this was a law, or I wish that wasn't a law? I don't know. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. I got a lot of my ideas from constituents who called me and said, hey, you know, this is happening this way, and I think it should be something different. Or lobbyists will come, or you get the ideas in all different ways. Some people they run, like if you have one thing that you think is so important and you run because you want to change that one thing. I know there are legislators who, that's what they've done. They've gone in, they've done that one bill, and then they're done. They did their thing, right? They got that one bill passed. So we get an idea, and then we have a lot of people up at the state who help draft it, because we don't know how to draft bills in that kind of language that fits laws. And if you change a law here, sometimes it changes lots of other laws that are related to that. So we have drafters, lawyers up there that will draft the bill for us, and it's called being numbered, okay? Then they number it when it's all ready. And then we introduce it to the legislature, and it goes to the Rules Committee. Sorry if you're just falling asleep, I'm sorry, you can sleep during this part. But so it goes to the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee is a really, really important, actually the chair of the Rules Committee is really important. There's only about 7 members on that committee, and they're legislators, and they decide where that bill is gonna go, okay? So we have all these different committees that I'll show you, but we have committees that kill bills, and maybe the rules people don't like that bill, so they send it to that committee that's gonna kill it. Or maybe they love that bill, and so they don't send it to the committee that knows the most about that bill, because they know it's a bad bill and that committee will kill it. So they send it to another more friendly committee for that bill. So you can see there's games being played all the time, right? But they're sending these bills to committees depending on a lot of factors. So they send it to a standing committee. And then in the standing committee, you guys are welcome, I'll show you in a second, but you can comment on bills. Every meeting is, except Rules Committee, I don't think that's an open meeting, is an open meeting. Everything we say is recorded. You can watch it. So these bills will get assigned to a committee, and then it will get on the agenda. That agenda has to be published in advance so that people will know, hey, that bill's coming up and I want to speak against it, or I want to speak for it, or I want to listen to what they have to say about it. So it goes to that committee, and during that time it can be amended, or it can be killed, or it can be passed through favorably. Like, all different things can happen in the committee. But if it gets through the committee and a majority vote yes, if a majority vote no, that's killed, that's dead, it's done. Okay, well, there's ways to bring it back, like a zombie kind of a thing. But Basically, that's mostly what's going to happen. So then it goes to the floor. And I was on the House of Representatives, so this all happens in House committees. And it comes to the House floor, and then it has to sit on that agenda for 24 hours, and it will just come in the order that it is. The House is presided over by the Speaker of the House. He gets to determine a lot of things, but you present your bill, you can debate it on the floor, and then there's a vote. Everybody has to vote. The first time I was on the floor, I was elected during the middle, so it wasn't during the regular session, but we had a special session, and they had these like 5 bills. It was that morning, I went in, got sworn in, and then they stuck me on the floor, and they said, okay, now you get to vote on these bills. One was on tax policy. Like, I didn't know anything about those bills, and I thought, well, I just won't vote, right? Like, I'll just sit here and let people who know about this vote. And they're like, no, you're on the floor, you have to vote. So everybody votes. You don't get out of it, and it's totally public. Everybody gets to see how you vote. So anyway, then after, let's say it passes here, like it gets, and the way the passing, I get too much into details. I'm sure my daughter's like, shut up, this is, okay, too many details, but it's just a majority vote, but it's a majority of the whole House. So we have 75 legislators, you have to get 38 votes. If only 40 people show up that day, you still need 38 votes. So it's not the majority of the people who are there, you have to get 38 votes for something to pass. Okay, so then it goes, it's debated, it passes, then it repeats this whole process again on the other side. So House of Representatives does it, then it has to go over to the Senate, repeat that whole process again with rules, with standing committee, with the Senate and all that stuff. If it passes that whole thing, it gets enrolled, then the governor can sign it or veto it, and then it becomes law. So it's a kind of a messy process, right? It's kind of this process that doesn't lend itself to quick action, which is a good thing because it gives time for people to have input. It gives time for legislators to hopefully think about a little bit when we're passing almost 600 bills in 7 weeks. Not that much time anyway, but it is kind of a messy process. Okay, I was going to show you that. Oh, here's what the floor looks like. We sit here. This is me. This is my grandson. My desk was right here. But we go around and talk, and we have a little voting thing right here, and we just push a button on there, like yes or no, and that's how we vote. I was going to talk about this bill a little bit, because I wanted to talk about whether or not you feel like you have a voice. Think about it. Do you feel like you have a voice? Do you even care if you have a voice? Like, some of you might be here because you are really interested in politics, but when I ask my classes at UVU, how many of you are registered to vote? How many of you voted? I'm really happy if like 2 people raise their hands, right? Like, it's not top of their list. I could ask you all the same question, like, how many of you are registered to vote? How many of you voted in the last election? I would like to think all of you, but a lot of times people feel like their voice is not heard, that it doesn't really matter, right, whether you vote or not. Sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it does. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think it's super important for you to be involved in the things that mean a lot to you and that you're interested in. So this right here was when I was on the floor. She is a public employee, okay? And I don't know, I'm going to assume, sorry, if I start talking too much, you'll be like, shut up. Okay, so there's a bill, HB 267, HB just stands for House Bill, number 267, so it's the 267th bill that was numbered. And what it did was it said that public employees, and those are employees that are employed by the government, okay, not private employers, but employed by the government, that they could no longer do collective bargaining, which means they couldn't get into their associations and bargain that way for salaries and for benefits and things like that. And there were also some other things in the bill that made it difficult for public employees to, it took away some of the rights that public employee associations have had. So one of the big things about, if you're going to do a bill, or if you're, this is just important for life in general, but it's really important to know what the problem is before you try to find the solution. I teach math, and I always tell my students that too. You got to figure out what you're trying to solve before you go about trying to solve it. Because if you start trying to solve it before you know what you're even trying to solve, you don't even know if the answer is going to work, right? You don't even know if that's going to be the right answer to anything that you're trying to figure out. So one of the problems with this bill that I see, and you're going to hear my bias, believe me in this, one of the things that I see is they were trying to solve a problem that was non-existent. Nobody could really articulate what the problem was, but they were bringing this bill and debating this bill and sponsoring this bill that really, really, really was a slap in the face to public employees. So I can tell you why that bill was run. First of all, have any of you heard of that bill? Is it even on your radar at all? Raise your hand if any of you have heard of this bill. Yeah, some people, okay. If you have parents that are school teachers or know of any school teachers or any other public, like firefighters, law enforcement, things like that, they were all against this bill. But what it was is the public education, the Utah Education Association, the UEA, has sued the legislature a couple of times over some of the things that the legislature has done, and I feel like it has sued rightfully. Like, I think that that's anybody's right, but I do feel like the legislature has treated the Education Association, which is made up of teachers and educators, really poorly. And so the Education Association has sued the legislature. Well, this bill was to slap them down, right? That's the problem it was solving, was we don't like you, and so we are going to do something that is going to be a thorn in your side and not allow you to collective bargain, not allow you to use public spaces, that's going to make you, renegotiate. Anyway, just all of this stuff. And so we have a lot of public employees in the state, if you just think of even all of the educators that we have. And they were there at the Capitol, thousands and thousands of people there protesting this, saying, don't vote yes, don't vote yes, vote no, vote no, vote no. And I mean, I contacted my legislators and said, vote no on this bill, please, and here's the reasons why. And, what problem are you trying to solve? Anyway, anybody want to guess what happened? It passed. Yeah, it passed, and the governor signed it. Despite the vast majority, I think there was like 2 people that spoke for it, and hundreds of people were there to speak against it in committee. That to me is a fail, right? Like if legislators are not going to listen, if the governor is not going to listen to people who take the time to show up, and then that's a fail on the part of government, and that's really too bad. And I was really surprised, actually. And so that makes people discouraged. It makes people feel like, what am I even doing here, right? But then I also wanted to talk about another instance, and this has to actually do with our Attorney General. Do any of you know what 504 accommodation plans are? Any educators in here would know, but I don't know, maybe some of you might be on 504 accommodation plans. My kids have been on, I think 3 of my kids have been on, 4 have had accommodation plans. And what it is it's a section of federal law that says people with disabilities get to have equal access, right? It helps businesses and schools and provide equal access to education or to programs or to things that everyone else has access to. And some of the disabilities that are outlined in this 504 are like epilepsy, ADHD, vision problems, allergies. I should have more on my list, but anyway, just different things like that, right? And so it's been in law for for decades. And then in May of 2024, last year, then President Joe Biden, he added another disability to the list that was gender dysphoria. And so Texas got upset by that, and so they sued the federal government, and they said that that the president had overstepped his bounds because Congress are the ones who passed the laws, and now he's adding to this law. Congress should be the ones, and to be fair, Congress, compared to the Utah legislature, Congress does nothing, right? So, which might be a good thing. But, and so they sued over that, but then they also said, they had a part of the lawsuit that said Section 504 should be declared unconstitutional because funding was tied to, anyway, the federal funding was tied to it and different things. So I had never even heard of this lawsuit, and there was an election in November. We got a new attorney general, and some of the advocates and parents saw what was in this lawsuit, and they started contacting the attorney general because Utah signed on to this lawsuit. Texas started it, but last year Utah signed on, and I think 15 other states, so Texas, Utah, and then 15 other states signed on to this lawsuit. That would take 504 accommodations away from the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of people who use them and students who use them. So anyway, this was just like maybe a week and a half ago that the Attorney General heard from all of these advocates and people, and guess what he did? He got all of the people, the plaintiffs together, the people who were suing, and said, hey, look at this part right here. This is no good. And so they submitted another brief along with it that said, we don't want this to be considered in this lawsuit. We only want you to consider the part about overstepping executive bounds. And the sad thing is that it's in the lawsuit, and so the court can look at what this additional filing is, but that doesn't mean they have to follow it. So they still can declare 504 unconstitutional. So our attorney and our attorney general has been really open and meeting with people, and he's meeting with the White House today, trying to get it all resolved so that they don't have to have the lawsuit. But that to me is a success, right? He wasn't even aware, but advocates went to him and said, this is a huge problem, and he saw that, and now he's trying to fix it. So there's a success. Another success is, if you think about voting, how many of you have heard, we do mail-in voting here in Utah, right? It has been, in my opinion, a really great thing, but people have been worried about fraud and different stuff in voting, and so there was a bill that said no more mail-in voting. Everybody has to return their ballots to a drop box or vote on the day of elections, and that's actually, most Utahns don't agree with that when you do polling, because that's hard, right? Especially if you live in a rural or remote area, it's hard to get to a place where there's a drop box. If you have a disability that makes it difficult to drive or to get out, there's a lot of reasons why getting to a drop box and having to vote in person, show your ID, and have 2 volunteers there guarding each drop box. Like, the whole thing was kind of ridiculous in my opinion. In my opinion, you can all love it, I don't know, but in my opinion, I thought this is going to disenfranchise a lot of people, and I don't see how it's going to work. So people have advocated against that bill and for that bill, but most people don't love that bill. So it's still passing through, but it's changed now so that you can still have mail-in. We're going to still keep mail-in voting, but you have to write your not your social security number, your driver's license number or your Utah ID number on the ballot. So that's going to be your identification, and you have to opt in when you go to the DMV to get your driver's license renewed. So that is an example of, I feel like, constituents and representatives working together to change a law at least partially to the better. And that happens a lot. Sometimes, you know, you can get a little change, and a little change is better than no change at all if we're looking at stuff that way. So I'm going to move on. Oh, this was just an idea. I'm not going to talk about this, but this was my daughter's car accident, not this one. It was pretty awful. And I found out some things about insurance, and so that was a way that I got an idea for a bill. Here's all of my bills. I'm just going to go through them. I'm not even going to go through them. Don't worry, not going to go through them. I don't even know if you can see them, but a lot of mine have to do with rental, like renters and mental health and education, special education, higher education. Here's the motor vehicle insurance stuff. Did a lot in criminal justice, especially juvenile justice. Anyway, we'll just go. Those right. Anyway, I was really interested to hear about if any of you have any ideas for laws that you've always thought would be amazing. Or, yes? Okay, so headlights and not allowing LED to be headlights. Am I understanding? Because they're too bright?
Yeah. My friend's brother.
Oh, is that? See, I would never have even thought of that, but if someone brought that to me as a legislator, I could go do research on that, see what best practices were in other states, see how bright it was, like do research on how many accidents are caused by this, because I have noticed that a lot of times lights have gotten brighter, and I think, are there brights on? But they never turn them off, so then I think, well, they must not be on. But, oh, that's really interesting. I like that. Anybody else? Yes? Free mental health care. I love that. You know, there's kind of a division up in the legislature between people who, like legislators who want the state to provide more services like that, like better Medicaid, better mental health services, like stuff. And actually, I'm one of those. I'm a Republican, but I am one of those. And then there's other legislators who happen to have more power, like in leadership in different places, that worry about the cost of those things, right? Like, and to me, I see Utahns as being very generous and wanting their taxes to go to things like this. And my constituents have let me know that through polls and different things that I do, surveys. But it's kind of a philosophical divide, and it's hard. I had to fight so hard to get some of that for homeless individuals, but it did get through, but it's hard to get the funding for that. I think that's excellent. That is something you could advocate for. Anybody else? Yes? Oh my goodness. Completely agree. And you know what? I love this because it's almost like you were made for me, because that's something that I worked on my first 3 years, that we were able to get it. When I first started, the social workers for DCFS, the caseworkers, were getting paid $15 an hour, and that's with a bachelor's degree of full-time frontline work. The turnover was incredible, and we got it raised to about closer to $20 an hour. That's still not enough, and the turnover is still incredible, and then when you get into the social workers with master's degrees, it only jumps up to like $25. I mean, it's just pathetic. You are absolutely correct, and I think that's really important. Anybody else? Okay, well, if you think of anything as we go, let me know. These are all I want to show you how you can advocate for the things that are important to you. So I don't know if you saw that, le.utah.gov, okay? This is a really important website that can teach you all things legislature. The LE are like the first two letters of the words legislator or legislature, either way. But when it comes up, it looks like this. And if you have any questions while we're going through this, just let me know. The first thing you might want to do is find out who your legislators are. How many of you know who your legislators are? Yeah, it's hard to know sometimes. Okay. If you come down here and just scroll down, do you see find your legislator right here? Let's put that in. Does anybody want to give me their address, or do you want me to put in mine? Because we can find, actually, I looked up Snow College's address. What is the address here? I can't remember. It's something College Drive. 150 College Avenue. Okay, so 150 College Avenue. Oh, it says enter zip. Okay, this is a little different than, sorry, I should look at what I'm actually doing. Enter the zip. So, oh, it has use my location. I could just even use my location right here, right? We're going to allow it. Sorry, I don't know whose computer this is. Okay, so, and it will just bring up, this is Troy Shelley. He's brand new, so he might be an easy one to manipulate. No, I'm just kidding. He might be not jaded yet and might be willing to listen to you. I think he would be willing. Legislators want to listen to their, well, I wish legislators wanted to listen to their constituents. Some legislators do. That's all I can say. And if you can develop a relationship with that, with your legislator, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that too in a bit. I keep saying I'm going to tell you about this, but if I don't get to that, let me know. But so here, and Darren Owens, he's great. I know Darren, and he's very compassionate. His wife is a special education teacher. He used to be a teacher. A lot of times, here's my other plug for advocacy. If you want better pay for social workers, or if you want, like these different wonderful things that you guys have told me about, letting them know that you are for that can be so helpful, because they are going against people who don't want that, right? And if they can say, oh, but my constituents want that, it's much easier for them to maybe do a vote on a bill that leadership doesn't want them to vote on. Does that make sense? They can use their constituents as an excuse. And so I think it's really important. Okay, so that's how you find who your legislator is. If you click on this, let's click on Troy Shelley here. We'll pick on him. It has his contact information. It has the phone, his address. Some of them will have, I always had just my home address in there. I had my home phone, home address, and then it has an email that you can write to them too. So this is how you can look at this. If you want to look at what they're sponsoring, view their sponsored legislation, you can go in there. He's really into public lands, right? I don't know if you guys can see that. Public land access road, public asset ownership, unclaimed property amendments. So he's really into land stuff. So he really needs to hear from you about other things that you're interested in, right? Okay, well, whatever. But you might notice that there are, you can see that I have public asset ownership amendments and public asset ownership amendments twice here. That's because one is a substitute. That means that they've changed from here to here. So it's the same bill, but it just has been updated to something else. If you want to know what the bill has to, let's look up a different thing. Okay, so now you know that. Let's go into here again, Utah Legislature. Let's look up, oh gosh, this is what I do all the time. Let's do a search. Let's do a search on, I don't know, social work, and see what happens here. So you can see this is all. You can see the filters on the right-hand side. I don't know if you guys can, I can't see very good, so hopefully you can see, but there's filters. I'm going to just put bills, because then it will just have bills that come up. And it has a lot of behavioral health amendments, state custody. You can go into any of these and say, I wonder what's going on here. What's social services programs amendments? So we can go in here. Ooh, I like Representative Dunnigan and Vickers. They do good stuff. And once you go in here and click on it, it gives a description of what the bill's going to do. You might not be able to see this, but it gives a description. It says, amends provisions related to the Medicaid, ACA fund, amends provisions, blah, 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 substance use programs, different stuff like that. And so you can go in and it tells what it's going to do, and then you can come down here and read the bill, crosses off stuff. Anyway, if you want to know how much it's going to cost, you can look at this. Every bill has to have a fiscal note. So you can see here that federal fund is going to mostly use federal funds. Look at that, pretty good. But a lot of this stuff isn't super easy to understand, but you can, if you contact the sponsor of this bill, they can explain it to you. We're supposed to, and I'm not one anymore, I'm speaking as if, public servants, right? We're supposed to be your servants and explain things to you and work with you and help you. That's part of our job. So anyway, that's a fiscal note. Another thing you might want to look at is status. I think this is really interesting. The status, you can see here, remember it's in Rules Committee. They sent it to Business, Labor, and Commerce Committee, which is usually a kill committee. But it got unanimous support there. It went to the House, and it got unanimous support there. It's already been through the Senate Health and Human Services Committee, so now it just has to get passed on the Senate floor. And if you want to say, well, who voted for that, or who voted against it, you can click on that, and it tells you all the people who voted for it, the people who weren't there. Anyway, I'm sure you guys are so thrilled in all of this stuff. I think it's super cool. I love le.utah.gov. I think you can learn so many things. Another thing is you can go into, well, committees. We have our standing committees now, and here's all, I don't know if you can see it, but we've got Business, Labor, and Commerce, Economic Development and Workforce Services, Education, Ethics, Government Operations, Health and Human Services, Judiciary, Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice, Natural Resources, Agriculture and Environment, Political Subdivisions, Public Utilities and Energy, Revenue and Taxation, and the Rules Committee, Transportation. And then we have Business has all of those same committees too. So somebody yell out a committee that they're interested in. Or just yell out the name of a committee. I don't care if you're interested in it. Thank you, because I can sit here all day long and wait. Let's see what happens to ethics, because I think ethics is its own little animal. So yeah, ethics, they meet not during session. Maybe they should. So thank you for doing that, but let's do another one that meets during session. All of them except for ethics meets during the session, so they're meeting now. So yell at another one. Yeah, we don't need ethics during the session. Education, that's always a good one. And education is higher education and K through 12. So here's the Education Committee page. If you look over here, you can see all the people who are on the committee, right here. They'll have links to different stuff here, whatever. You can click on any of these, so it will take you right to them, and you can email them or do whatever. Then over here, it has a list of all the meetings you can see that are, these are all the past meetings. They're only going to they have a meeting on Thursday, a meeting on Friday, and then a meeting on Tuesday, and that's their last meeting for this session. For their Thursday, February 27th meeting, these are all the bills that they're going to talk about. If you see a bill that I only have 5 minutes. Oh, okay, I'll hurry. Thanks. This is why I have to have other people. Okay, I will talk forever, so I need someone to keep me good. But anyway, you can click on any of these bills. You can, if you wanted to, you can join the meeting. Anyway, I will let this go because and here's all the assigned bills that have been assigned to them, and it's hard to see all the bills that have been assigned to them. But I wanted to kind of just really quickly, I'll be done here. I wanted to talk about this. 85% of Utah's registered voters voted in the election last year. That's amazing. That's really, really great, and that has a lot to do with mail-in ballots. However, check out this number, 40%. 40% of registered Utah voters voted in the 2023 election. The difference is one was a presidential election and the other one was a municipal election, right? So if you, this year, we have an election. We have election every single year. Even years are state offices. Odd years are municipal, like your mayor or your city council, like that. Very few people vote in those elections. What elections do you think have the most impact on you? Local, thank you, my daughter yelled it out. Local elections have the most impact on you. And those are the ones that people do not get involved in. And those are elections that are often won or lost by a handful of votes. Pretty crazy, right? Like, you can be a huge voice in your local elections. So I would push you to be involved in those things. I think it's really hard for students to, like, you guys are busy. It's hard to try to get involved in those things, but if you can, that's where your voice will really, really make a difference. And here's just some really quick that I'm going to go through, and then I want questions. Some of the things that I learned when I was in the legislature. Don't believe everything you read and hear. You need to have a healthy skepticism of stuff. Be curious. Sometimes we'll just hate somebody, right? Like, we hear something, we read stuff, and we think, oh gosh, that person's full of crap. Or they ran that bill, I hate them. I'll tell you what, there are people who run both really good and really bad bills all at the same time. People are complicated, right? Be curious, find out, why are you running this bill? Or why do you act this way? Or what's going on with this policy? And that applies to both where you get your news sources and in lawmakers and policymakers. Just be curious. Have a generous, open heart, okay? Let's see. Recognize your own bias. We all have feelings about things that come to us from the way we were raised, where we live, what we've been exposed to, all of that stuff. Bias isn't bad, but you just need to recognize your own bias and be aware of it and understand that some other people are going to have a different bias than you. And then when you recognize your bias, have an open mind. Like, realize that. I remember when I first got in there and I wanted to help all the renters, right? And so I got together with I like to get all the stakeholders together, and I thought, oh, these renters, they have so much. I'm just going to help them. Then when I got and started talking to the landlords, I got a whole different point of view, right? And yeah, I still wanted to help the renters, but I didn't want to do it in a way that would hurt the landlords, the good landlords either. And so it's having that open mind, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's a whole other world out there that I was unaware of, right? And so those are some of the things that I've learned. I will be quiet now. If you guys have any questions, please have some questions. You can ask me math questions too. No, just, does anybody have any questions about?
Maybe just 1 second. If you do have a class that starts at 1:30, you can leave, but we want to stay here to make sure we have about 10 minutes of questions. But if you do have a class, feel free to go.
Yes,
and while we're waiting, because of the live stream, we do want to have the questions on the microphones. So I know Maya, do you have a microphone? And so just wait till you get the microphone before you ask the question for those who are watching online. Sound good?
Thank you all for being here. I do appreciate it. Thanks. Be involved. Vote this year. Register to vote. There's my big thing. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, yes. Oh, sure.
So one of my current issues with figuring out how to be involved is my residency is technically in another state at the moment. So I don't know so should I contact the Utah representatives? I'm going to be staying here until I get residency.
Yeah, and do you know what? You don't have to have residency to vote here. I think what's the rule? I should have looked it up before I came here, but I think if you have lived here 2 or 3 months, that you are eligible to vote here. You can register to vote. So you might want to look into that. And I think you don't have to tell, when you contact a representative, a mayor, or anything like that, I'm a student at Snow College. I am planning on voting, and here is my issue, right? Like, just let them know, and they should listen to you either way, whether or not you're a resident here, shouldn't matter. You're living here, right? And you have a valid point of view. So thanks. Does that help? Okay.
What qualifications do you need to get involved in the legislature?
Oh, that's a really good question. You don't need any. Really, you have to be 25, 25 or older. And we've got, adding on to that, so I think the best thing that you can be is you. Like, honestly, when you look at the makeup of the legislature, we have a lot of developers, realtors, lawyers, and people who own businesses, right? Like, big business. And it's really nice. And if you want to be one of those things, totally great. That's not a qualification. But what we really need is a more broad view, because we don't have that many teachers. We don't have that many social workers. We have one social worker in the whole legislature. So that's only one person who can advocate for that position, right? College professors, we have just a few who've been college, but like, there are a lot of industries and businesses, and just being a mom or a dad, just being a son or a daughter, just being from a small town or a big town, those are qualifications, because it gives you a unique perspective, and that is really, really important. So anyway, all about that. Just people deciding they want to serve. That's all it is. So I think we have 2 police officers. Yeah. Anyway, so anybody else have any questions? Over there's one. Oh, and some over here, yeah.
So what is the best way of approaching your representatives when they're on the opposite aisle of the political divide than you are?
I think that's a great question. We have a supermajority in our legislature, which means that Republicans rule everything, like rule everything. They can overrule a veto, they can overrule anything. And so if you're a Democrat, you might feel like it's really hard to get your voice heard, but we do have some Democrat people in, and maybe Republicans feel like, Republicans always probably feel like, but I feel like my voice isn't heard, and I'm a kind of a moderate Republican too, right? Like, that voice can be hard sometimes if you have super left or super right. I think the best thing to do is to develop a positive relationship with them, tell them the things that you like that they're doing, and then suggest improvements to, like, let's say they are running a bill that you absolutely hate, or they're supporting something you absolutely hate. You probably won't get them to completely drop that, right? But you might be able to get them to move a little bit on parts of it. And that's better than nothing. So I think seeing that as a victory is probably really good. Legislators are really busy during the session, especially. Short, sweet, to the point, kind, curious, generous, best ways to communicate. But some legislators are just really hard. Like, they just don't listen. But yeah, I think suggesting small changes to what they're doing is going to be the best. Does that answer your question? Okay. And then you over here?
This is off topic, but how's your day going?
I'm sorry, what?
How's your day going?
How's my day? It's great. Is that your question? Okay, I don't think that microphone's working very well, but that's very kind. Thank you. It's been a little stressful trying to get here and kind of almost being late, but I really appreciate you being here. Here's something I would really like to say, and I can see you're like, gotta go. But getting involved before the session, like, and I mean before the election, before everything. Next March, in every even year, so in 2026, 2028, 2030, there is a caucus meeting. The caucus meeting is where everything happens. If you're, if you go to that and you want to run for delegate, or you can vote in delegates that you feel like support the way that you feel, that's going to do far more than waiting until you got somebody in there that isn't someone that you were really thrilled about. So getting involved early enough, that's what, if you don't like what's going on, if you like what's going on, great. If there are things you would like to change about some stuff, we have to change the people who are up there. And people who have been called incumbents, they have all the advantages. They've got they've got money sources, they've got other support from different people, and it's really hard to get an incumbent out. But I just feel it's really important for people to serve and move on, and allow other voices and other people to get in. So anyway, I don't know if that made any sense. A lot of people are like, yeah, I don't understand Utah's caucus system. But just remember that word, caucus. Remember it for next March, and then show up. They're horrible meetings, but just show up. So.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Let's and I know if any of you have questions you'd rather ask, like one-on-one,
Yeah.
that we can hang around for a little bit longer. But let's give a last round of applause, and thanks for coming.
Thank you. Good.